one of the things that we know people are struggling about with AI because they're telling us is it seems so big, it seems so sort of encompassing that it's really hard to think about from a strategic point of view what you should be doing, what your team should be doing, what your business should be doing, because it's a bit jab, jab, right hook, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you on the LinkedIn last week published a really interesting post that I think gives us a useful kind of framework for thinking about, where we are, each of us individually and from a business point of view, on that kind of AI adoption curve. And I thought it would be useful just to talk through those levels and see if we can help some people out.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think just for a bit of context, I think it's worth saying, Nick, you and I have spoken about this a lot, and I just want to sort of reiterate a little bit because I think this is really important to give context. But, I'm years old now. I'm living in a time where I'm seeing, for the first time, really, I'm seeing a genuine sort of worry and threat to the way that I've been able to do my work. Such a long time. I was a developer. I'm user experience. I've done a lot of product strategy. I'm not a junior person in the digital space at all. But actually, every time I look at LinkedIn, I go on Instagram, I look at TikTok, or spend any time on Twitter or something. All I'm seeing again and again and again are these messages saying AI is coming. It can take your job. It can do this, that, and the other. And I genuinely think to myself, oh my crikey, how on earth am I? How am I going to adapt to this? It's scary, right? I feel
Yeah.
fear. And as part of that fear, what I've been doing is, what we've been doing together, actually, because it's not just me that's doing this, what we've been doing is we've been trying to lean into AI and practical lessons that we as older statesmen of the digital,
Some of us older than others, Matt.
but so that we can start to understand the wheat from the chaff and the signal from the noise and things, because it's not obvious. If you go onto Google or if you go onto YouTube and you say, and you want, give me the 5 most important impacts on AI at the moment or what have you, you're going to get videos about vibe programming. You're going to get the videos about how to use this niche tool, which is literally, like some dude has vibe coded a AI tool that will, translate your company accounts for you into another way. But you don't know anything about the provenance with regards to data security and all that sort of stuff. There is so much noise about what's good and bad, and it's really hard to tell the difference. So we've been really leaning into that. From experience, we know how to assess good from bad in terms of tools and
Practical applications.
the practical application of these things. And what that occurred to me is that I haven't been able to find a very good framework for understanding where I am on my AI adoption journey. So, I don't know whether just me using ChatGTP to ask it questions and like a Google search essentially. So what's interesting is there's a lady called Ali Miller who is one of the top voices of AI on LinkedIn. She's really great, actually. Her webinars are amazing, genuinely amazing. But what's interesting about her is that her work seems to be targeted very much to younger AI enthusiasts. It seems very much geared towards millennials and Gen Zs than sort of Gen Xers who are what I am. It's great work. I'm not detracting from it at all. But her posts are very much geared up towards that. And so what I was trying to get to is, how do I understand my journey on this? So she talks about this AI first mentality and how you use AI to change the way you work, not just use AI. Now, what does that mean? Well, I kept thinking to myself, what does that actually mean? Because if I'm using ChatGTP to analyze the content of a spreadsheet to understand what the trend is around my sales forecasts for, USA. So let's say I've got a spreadsheet, it's a global spreadsheet database of, our sales across multiple regions, and I want to ask a question. what percentage of my sales is in the US that's going to be affected by the tariffs that Donald Trump has applied or something. Whatever that question is, that human question, that natural language question I need to ask. So from a Gen X perspective, I'm using that tool. I'm not changing the way I work to understand with AI to do that. I'm just using that
Yeah.
another tool in another way to get to the outcome rather than just doing it manually. So I'm saving a whole
Yeah.
bunch of time, but I'm not AI first, because in an AI first way, you might have a workflow that's set up that looks at the news, see that Donald Trump has announced 50% tariffs on steel, and it would say, you would have an agent that says, do we do any work in the steel industry that affects America? Yes, we do. Okay, I'm going to look in our accounts, our sales forecast, and work out what the impact to that business is going to be based upon that announcement. And I'm going to let all of the heads of departments know what those things are. So that's the difference between like AI first and just using AI.
And it will be running in the background all the time,
Yeah.
right? It wouldn't be something that you would trigger. It would be something that would alert you if something came
Absolutely.
up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what I was trying to get my head around is, what are the gates? What are the sort of areas that I need to, what are the behaviors that are exhibited at each step of the way so that I know whether I've moved from being just a user or a detractor of AI through to being an AI first individual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's not just you, is it? I mean, we can talk a lot about the younger people in business, people who are building their own company, or creators or influencers or whatever. But what you represent and what I represent to some extent is a lot of people who work in companies, who work in businesses. They are not, stringing their own things together with no code solutions necessarily, but they are doing big work for big clients, or, it's that level as well, isn't it?
And
It's
I
the
think,
complex work of business.
and I think that's what really got me thinking about it, because like you say, right, there are a lot of YouTube videos and influencers, a lot of information available to you, which tells you about how to use AI as an accelerator for being a content producer. And, I'm not seeing a lot of practical examples about how to use AI to be a better line manager or a team leader, or, do you know what I mean? Like those are much
Yes,
harder.
exactly.
They are much, much harder use cases to model. And they're very specific
Yeah.
to most organizations. There's not a generic way of doing it, but there is only one way to generate 5 different thumbnails, which you're going to A/B test for your YouTube video, which is all important work for the people that's relevant to, but it's not relevant to
Sure.
me and the people that I'm talking to. Anyway, so we've got these 4, I call them AI user archetypes because marketing for the win. But so what we've got is bystanders, conversationlists, automators, and orchestrators. So they're my the 3 sort of buckets of user behaviors.
Four
Four
buckets.
buckets of user behaviors. You're absolutely right. There was originally only 3, and that was conversationalist, automator, and orchestrator. And I was having a really good conversation with a guy on LinkedIn when I posted this post, and he was like, well, I'm, for better or worse, I'm not anything AI. I'm not interested in it at all. I don't think it's good enough. I don't think it's, I don't think at the moment it's solving a problem. And I thought, oh my God, you've completely missed out. Like, and I've had these thoughts myself, Nick. We spoke about it before, and I said that, I had to listen to some AI fanboys telling me about all these great tools that I should be using to make my life better as a developer or as a UX person or as a product owner, because I didn't get it, because I kept saying to myself, why would I want to use a tool that's guessing at what I need to achieve rather than me just doing what I need to achieve? And I'd missed that whole, I'd been saying those things to myself, and I'd missed that whole archetype. And that's why I ended up creating the Bystander.
Yeah.
So at a high level, so we got so you've heard this 1,000 times. I'm going to tell it to you anyway. but I'm going to read it. So I'm going to make sure I get it right. So bystander. So bystander, as an archetype, you are standing at the edge of the AI revolution, watching it unfold from a distance. You might have heard about AI in conversation. You might have seen the tools pop up in your feed or even tried a chatbot once. But for you, it just doesn't stick. You're not convinced AI is relevant to your work yet. Maybe you think it's overhyped, unreliable, or not just ready for the tasks that you have. And you might have a mixed feeling of curiosity, skepticism, and a healthy dose of caution. I think I'll throw into that fear as well, because I think that,
yeah, for sure.
you know, like hearing about all the things that everyone suggests AI can do is scary. But I think bystanders are thoughtful and observant, and they're just waiting for clearer use cases to come through. So what they need is higher quality reasons to jump in. At the moment, it just feels like AI is for somebody else. It's not for them right now. So you've got the bystanders. So they're the people that are not actively using AI. They're aware of it, but really, and they're aware of the potential impact of it, but really they don't have sufficient use case to move them into using it all the time. Cool. So then we have the conversationalist. So a conversationalist is, that's the sort of person that essentially uses ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Copilot. And what you're doing is you're asking it questions constantly. You're saying things like, how old are Torval and Dean? Which is what Tam and I say every time Dance on Ice comes on, because we never remember every year, but we use Siri to tell us that every year.
Yeah.
So basically the conversationists, so they're in the thick of the conversation. They use tools like ChatGPT, Claude or Gemini to ask questions, draft emails, brainstorm ideas. But very essentially what you're having is one-on-one interactions with that particular chatbot or that LLM. So the AI is your sparring partner, they're your research assistant, or it might be that they're just your mate and you're, you're creating stories together or whatever it is. But it's all done through a chat window. So it's an AI tool you dip into. It's not embedded in any of your workflows at all.
Yeah, it's separate. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely separate from your standard workflows. It's really interesting because there's an advert that I keep getting spammed with on Instagram, and it says, stop using AI as a chat partner and start using it to automate your life. And then it basically just says to you how to get ChatGPT to do some stuff that ChatGPT can't actually do. Like by itself, it can't do the automation that
Right.
it is that advert is suggesting you're doing, which just goes to show how muddied the landscape is in terms of tools, because it's so easy now to produce marketing vignettes and videos and very realistic looking videos of what tools can do, that even though it's vaporware.
Yeah, there's a lot of hallucinations out there, aren't there? I was having lunch with a lawyer the other day, and we were talking about the number of legal briefs in the UK that have been shown to have erroneous case law referenced in them, because lawyers are using ChatGPT to gather up their information, and a lot of it might be right, but some of it's not right. And the judges, Matt, the judges are not happy.
No, I bet they aren't. Could you imagine? Oh wow.
All right, so that's the second level. That's the conversationalist.
What I will say is at the conversationalist level is at that point you've got to remember that ChatGPT or whatever chatbot you're using, you need to imagine that they are a sort of a junior mid-weight employee who is really enthusiastic and is not yet able to finish the work for you. Do you know what I mean? You've just got to, like, they might confabulate because they're worried about not giving you an answer. So they might give you what they think is an answer. That's how you've got to treat that partner, right? At that level, it's like, it's going to make mistake. It's going to, I don't like using the word hallucination because I don't think that's true. I think it's confabulation. And I think that it thinks it's right. It's not trying to make things up to fool you. It's telling you things because it thinks it's right.
And as we said before, these things are always very confident. It's one of the things that we know that humans fall for. We fall for confidence all the time. If someone looks confident, we think, oh, they know what they're doing. And that's 100%. One of the challenges with AI, isn't it?
So then you've got some third archetype, really, I suppose, is the automator. So this is the person who's moved beyond asking questions. So you're designing workflows where AI is a step in the process. So a great example of this is we just built a whole bunch of workflows for a really large hotel chain where we're trying to create some training material for them. And so the vendor of the tool that they're using has got a whole bunch of videos that is available to them. So we've built them a workflow which takes the video, creates a transcript from it, and then we'll create a standard operating procedure from the transcript. So you don't have to have a person to do it, essentially. So you're using it to summarize documents, you're using it to translate, to clean data, you might use it as an FAQ bot. So you might create a way of ingesting all of your content into a organizational second brain, for example. It's that kind of thing. It's automating those processes and using the reasoning capabilities of those models to help you to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And
Cool.
when you do this, you are combining AI at the back end with other tools
Yes.
to create that flow. So it's not just a flow with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, is it? It's
No.
bringing things together and using the
Yeah.
pipelines between them.
So you may be using a tool like Copilot Studio or make.com or NAN or Zapier. And what you're saying is, when I have added a file to this folder, I want you to use ChatGPT to analyze the content of the file and do X, Y, or Z with it. Here's a great example. So let's say you want to automate your invoicing process, right? You can create a spreadsheet on Google Docs, and in the spreadsheet, you can add a new line, which is, I need to invoice customer A, £1,000 on this date. What you then have is, behind the scenes, you have an automation that says, when this row updates, what I want is for the AI to go off and say, is there a new invoice that needs to be raised? Yes, there is. Okay, in that case, I'm going to connect to, I don't know, zeros configuration, and I'm going to squirt in this information from this spreadsheet, and I'm going to raise that invoice. And then what happens is, in order to be safe, what you do is you say, create a draft invoice. And then when that draft invoice has been created, you can then push a message into Slack, or you can send yourself an email saying, invoice 5 has been raised. Please validate and send on when you're comfortable. And that's what that process is. So you're using AI to do that, to connect those systems and to do that thinking about how to transform that data from what you've got in your spreadsheet to what Zero needs to create an invoice. So what that does is that gives us a glimpse. So automation can happen at two levels. One can just be straight workflow automations, which you use AI in. Others can be automations where the AI itself will decide the next best action that it's going to take. And that's when you start looking at that level, that's when you move into the last user archetype, which is the orchestrator.
Wow.
So at that point, you've got a little agent, for example, that's sat there so I've got one on my mailbox. And basically what it does is it looks for any type of email that comes into my mailbox that requires an action. So it's somebody asking me a question, maybe the question isn't obvious, but it's inferred. So what the agent does is it sits there and says, check my email. You are the system prompt is something along the lines of, you are a first-class personal assistant. Your job is to make sure that any actions that come to me via an email are captured and added to my task list with a requisite deadline so that I can meet my customers' expectations or something. So that's the agent, and then it has access to two tools. So the first tool is the check your email tool, and the second tool is the add task to task list tool. And so what you do is you say, you've got access to these tools. So your job now is to just sit there monitoring my email. Anytime a new email comes in, it knows that it needs to check the email, and it knows that it needs to use the next tool to add a task to my task list. And so what happens is over time, you build up a whole bunch of these little agents, and you are responsible for them doing their work. So you might have a coding agent, for example, that, you know, you've told it that you need to create a tool that, I don't know, sends out a marketing email to a list of clients over here. And so it will go off and create all that. It will do it for you. You don't have any input whatsoever on the way that it solves a problem, but your responsibility is to ensure that it's done the job you need it to do. And my view is that we as individuals, especially as senior leaders, right? We as people who run our own businesses or work at the highest level in organizations, we need to be able to move, not just us, but we need to be able to move our teams from being bystanders and conversationalists to becoming automators and orchestrators. Because the one thing that AI can't do, and I would suggest would never be able to do particularly well, to have that creative spark to say, why do I need to do this? What human or business goal am I trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
Right? That's going to be, we need to preserve that as the domain of the people that are in the workplace. And we need to use AI to do the stuff that it's good at, which is all of the mechanical stuff. You know, they're like
It's
drawing this design. It doesn't
about,
know. Yeah.
it's about human experience, creativity, and empathy, isn't it? Which is
Yes.
always going to be a struggle for AI. But those
Yeah.
three things, I think.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we're thinking about the work we're doing, we all want to be moving up there. And then, as you say, backfilling with automation and AI,
Yeah.
that we can spend as much time in that rarefied space, creating
Yeah.
value from experience, from creativity, from empathy with other
Yeah.
people.
And I think that, I mean, a little while ago, we were speaking about this fear of what's going to happen to the sort of junior roles. And I know last week, of Anthropic did another opinion piece out, and he said that he believes that most 50% of junior and entry level roles will be removed from the economy within the next 3 years. I think he said something like that, within a very short space. This is not, he said this a lot. This is not new. But I actually, the more I think about it, and I've been extremely worried about that, because I keep thinking to myself, well, if all the senior and experienced people are, you know, becoming automators and orchestrators, and then they get to a point where they want to retire or they want to move on, who's training the next level of people to have that design thinking, critical thinking skills, to understand the value part of the work that we do? Why, not the how. And but I kind of, in this model where you are working towards, you know, automation, orchestration, stuff like that, I do now believe that there is going to be a lot more opportunity for people to work within those spaces. They may not be doing the same work. They may not be creating wireframes and learning how to be a UX designer, but I genuinely think that the amount of processes, the amount of automation that can be applied to the work we do, the amount of, you know, agents that could be created to do stuff, and managing and maintaining and dealing with those, is actually genuinely might create that new area, a new area of work, a new role within a team. So I'm hoping that that's might happen.
I think we've said this before. It's worth repeating ad nauseum. I think that success comes to those who are flexible and agile, particularly at times like this, and also prepared to do the hard work. It's me as a writer, you know, I mean, writing is going away in a lot of ways. Right?
Yeah.
Writing is going away, but on the other hand, thinking, which is what I really associate with writing, is very much here to stay. And what we might find is there's tons of people who now get AI to do their writing work for them. Those people will not win ultimately because they're not building the skills, they're not doing the strategic sort of work that will allow them to succeed. And if you're just using AI like that, then you're just like all the other people who are just using AI like that.
Yeah.
So in your example, the junior developers who would have done well because they would have pushed harder
Yeah.
in that role, well, AI is an extraordinary bounty for them because it's now easier to do. First of all, it's easier to learn, but
Yeah,
second of all, their ability to extend beyond their core skill. If your core
yeah,
skill is coding, you can now do some design. If your core skill is design, you can now create working prototypes. I mean, when I
yeah,
started, I do a wireframe, as you say, and hand it over to other people to do a design, and they'd hand it over to other people to do the coding. Now the opportunity is there for me and anyone to go a lot farther, a lot faster. So
yes.
it's about the importance of
Yeah,
the
and that's the
drive, the creativity, the vision, all
yeah.
of that stuff.
But I think, the truth is that there will be a bunch of lazy people, and I think this is what annoys me, I think, about this whole vibe coding sort of label that we're putting on things, because the label is used in a derogatory way for most people, because it's like designers, established developers saying, yeah, but they're not real designers, or they're not real developers because they haven't done the work that I've done to be an
Yeah,
expert in
you
my
wait.
craft.
Yeah,
Well, the point is that actually they're the ones that are learning how to use the tools. They are learning through trial and error what works, what doesn't work. They're not going to sit on their asses and just, not understand how to make things secure, or not how to make
yeah.
things robust and scalable, because they will learn that that's what you needed to do, in the way that I had to learn that, you always do user journeys before you do wireframes, because otherwise you're not going to find all of the screens you need to create and all the interactions you need to create, right? You learn that by doing. They're just learning it and doing it in a different way. Now, they're
With
going to
with
be
with
2,
much better
3 years,
tools and a
5
lot of
years.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're going to be well ahead of us. So as people
Mm.
with experience, as people who are already established, if we don't rethink the way we work, and this comes back to what Ali, oh my God, her second name has just left me. Ali Miller. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is what Ali Miller was saying. So the AI first mentality is not about using AI tools first. It's about using AI tools to accelerate your delivery practice. Now, those vibe coders, those vibe designers, those developers that are now doing great design work in, Google's latest product, or in Figma Make or something like that, right? They are already accelerating ahead of you. And,
Yeah.
as leaders, as senior leaders who are leading teams, we need to remind our teams that they need to be embracing this stuff at the moment. And they're going to hit this plateau where they're thinking to themselves, well, I can't, it'll be easier for me to do this by myself. It will be easier for me to do this without AI. Well, it may be because you're experienced, but the point is that you are going to take 10 days to do something, to get something to a level that somebody using AI will take an hour, 2 hours to. And they will have created an asset which would have accelerated the team well beyond the thing that you have delivered. Because if you're just delivering wireframes and you hand that over to development, if that takes you a week and you hand that over to to a developer, they've got to build all of the infrastructure to support that delivery. If you're using Figma Make to create a prototype and it's created a code base for you, that has already accelerated the developer by, it's taken you less time, and it's accelerated the developer by a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever.
If you are worried about what's coming or scared about what's coming, you can dive in, you can run away, or what happens with a lot of people is they freeze, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what we are getting at the start. I think it feels so big, and I think
Yes.
what the framework that you've talked through. Yeah, I know where I am on that, and by knowing where I am, I know the next level where I want to go, right? And hopefully that's helped people because freezing is going to be if you're freezing, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
You got to move into this world rather than away from it, I think.
Yeah. I agree.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, mate. I'll speak to you again soon.
Yeah, we do. See you later.